Hi, I'm Laura DePue from First Church, and I'm going to reflect on John chapter 9, verses 1 through 41. This is the chapter where Jesus heals a blind man who had been blind from birth. And verse 1 begins, "As Jesus passed by, he saw a man who had been blind from birth. Jesus then says to his disciples, 'We must carry out the works of him who sent me. As long as it is day, night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world.' When he had said this, he spit on the ground and made mud from the saliva and applied the mud to his eyes and said to him, 'Go, wash in the pool of Siloam,' which is translated sent. So he left and washed and came back seeing. So the neighbors and those who previously saw him as a beggar were saying, 'Is this not the one who used to sit and beg?' Others were saying, 'This is he.' Still others were saying, 'No, but he is like him.' The man himself kept saying, 'I am the one.'" Now, this is a really long passage, so I'm going to summarize parts and read parts of the actual scripture. But in this part, the people who knew him as a blind man are bickering amongst themselves, wondering if this changed man who is returned is the same blind man that they knew previously. And it's interesting to note here that in the original Greek of this text, the term used is ego eimi, which makes me feel like this man is frustratingly insisting, I am the man, because that would literally translate to I am. This is also a construction that Jesus commonly uses to indicate that he is the great I am too, which is also interesting. So next, the confused public takes this man to the Jewish authorities, the Pharisees, and the Pharisees argue amongst themselves on whether Jesus could be the Son of God or a sinner. And it seems the majority come to the agreement that they believe Jesus to be a sinner. This is not only because he broke the law of working on the Sabbath by healing, but also because he performed miracles in general and has claimed to be the Messiah. Interestingly enough, it is postulated that Jesus chose to heal this man in the manner that he did by using clay mixed with spittle on the Sabbath, because there was actually a specific prohibition against activities such as mixing and kneading dough, which that specific action would have been classified as. So Jesus was not only trying to heal this man, both physically and spiritually, but also trying to make a point by clearly going against the rigid dogma of the Jewish leaders. When the man is brought before the Pharisees, verse 18 states, "The Jews did not believe it about him, that he had been blind and had received sight, until they called the parents of the very one who had received his sight." It's important to note that when John uses the term the Jews, he's not talking about the everyday people, but the Pharisees in this case. So when questioning the parents, they go on to assert that their son is of age, so they suggest the Pharisees direct their questions to their son, the blind man. Verses 22 through 24 say, "His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jews. For the Jews had already reached the decision that if anyone confessed him to be Christ, he was to be excommunicated from the synagogue. For this reason, his parents said, 'He is of age, ask him.'" Here we see the man's parents are afraid to speak up because they were afraid of excommunication. After this point, the Pharisees continued to argue with the man that having his sight restored wasn't possible. When the Pharisees run out of logical arguments against this man, they resort to mocking him, and then they throw him out. The man referred to Jesus as a prophet, and he pointed out that in all of Scripture, this is the only time a blind man had ever been healed. And in fact, in Isaiah, the prophecy of the Messiah does state that the Messiah will heal the blind. Throughout the course of the narrative, the man begins to understand that Jesus is more than just a prophet and is in fact the Messiah, and says that he worships him. The Pharisees overhear this conversation, and in verses 39 through 41, it states, "And Jesus said, 'For judgment I came into this world, so that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind.' Those who were with him from the Pharisees heard these things and said to him, 'We are not blind too, are we?' Jesus said to them, 'If you were blind, you would have no sin. But now that you maintain we see, your sin remains.'" Here, Jesus is basically stating that he came into the world so that the blind, those who previously did not see spiritually, would have their eyes opened, and that those who refuse to see him as the Messiah are blind. The Pharisees, who insist that they see refuse to see Jesus as the Messiah right in front of them, so in their seeing they are blind, and this is their sin. One has a choice to come towards Jesus as the light or to shrink away from the light, and the choice that one makes determines the judgment that is referred to here in verse 39. So when I reflect on this story, I can't help but see a parallel in our own polarized time. In the ever-rising tensions of our modern chaotic world, humanity tends to organize into opposing polarized groups, and sometimes even warring tribes, each with their own specific sets of rules and beliefs and dogmas. And the internet has largely facilitated the situation where often these polarized groups battle it out in public, and others simply take part for the purpose of being hostile. This debate often becomes vicious, and as all sides abandon reasonable conversation, they often resort to viciousness and mocking, just as we see here with the Pharisees and the formerly blind man. In private conversation, someone might tell you, regardless of which group they tend to affiliate with, that they agree with their tribe for the most part, but some things might not seem quite right to them, but they're afraid to say so because whichever group it is they identify with would excommunicate them if they say what they are plainly seeing with their own eyes. Here, the Pharisees want that formerly blind man to reject the light, or the sight that Jesus provides, that which he can plainly and now literally see with his own eyes. To believe in Jesus as the Messiah, but otherwise largely identify as Jew and continue following most Jewish customs was not good enough to remain a part of the in-group at that time. It was all or nothing, and even if one had an authentic witness or experience of the divinity of Jesus, they were expected to deny it to remain in good standing with the group. In our world today, sometimes it seems easier to go along with the group, whatever group that is, rather than speaking up when something feels wrong. Jesus refers to the Pharisees' willful blindness as their sin, and perhaps it would benefit humanity as a whole to step back and see where our own blind spots are when we engage with our fellow humans, and to create a psychologically safe environment that allows other people to feel like they can speak up and speak the truth without fear if they think they need to.